Hey, I'd like to show you how to import contacts into SeedCode Complete. This is SeedCode Complete, and here are the contacts. You can see we have 500, we don't have any found, but we have 500 contacts over here. And here's a little names table I put together with 100 contacts in it that I want to import. Now, this started as a CSV file, but I imported it into FileMaker and just had it make a new file for me, because it's a lot easier to do these imports from a FileMaker table, and I'll show you why in just a minute. Before I do, I just want to talk about a couple of issues with SeedCode Complete that makes the imports kind of tricky, and probably the reason you're watching this video. It's not exactly like importing into a normal flat file. So here are the issues. First, Amy Sampson over here has this phone number, this 855 number, but she's also got one more. She's got a cell phone. So if you go to look and edit her record, you'll see that the primary phone number is stored over here in her record, but both phone numbers are stored over here in the additional phone numbers area. So we want to make sure that we get that, because we like being able to kind of switch which one is her primary phone number, right, and switch it back like that. We want to be able to preserve that. So that's one thing. The other thing you can see is that Amy can belong to more than one company, and that companies are stored in a separate table, right? So here are my companies. So we want to make sure we capture that as well. And then finally, the last thing to remember is that while this is the interface file, if you go into define tables here, you won't see the contacts table over here. That's off in the SeedCode model file, which is a different file where all our data is. So with those things in mind, let's start importing contacts in here. It goes pretty quickly, but there are a couple little tricks I want to show you. And the first is to make a few new fields in this names table. This is our source, and we're going to make a few new fields. I'll tell you what they're for in just a second as I make them. So one is called Temp ID, then Contact ID, and then Company ID. Looks like I missed my Contact ID. Create, and then Company ID. Great, so 3 new fields, and I'm going to put those on the layout just because it makes things a lot simpler. Great. Now, we want SeedCode to generate the IDs for all these contacts. That way we make sure that there are no duplicate IDs in the SeedCode system. Now, your contact may already have an ID. If they do, that's what goes here. In fact, you can just use your existing ID field for this Temp ID. You know, the rest of the video when we're using this, you use your ID field. But since I don't have an ID field here, I'm going to go to Replace Field Contents, and I'm going to give all these guys just a little unique ID, right? Just a little number field. That's going to be a big help later. Now we're almost ready to import, so I'm going to go to my model file. I'm going to unlock it so I can get at this button, and I'm going to switch down to the contacts layout. Contacts. Now I'm going to make a new field here too, called Temp ID. And you're going to do this even if you have an ID in your existing system. Just make that contacts. And then I'm going to put a few fields on the layout here so that it's easier to follow here. I'm going to grab the ID. I'm going to grab the real ID, and then maybe just their first and last name. And let's put that over here. All right, so now we're ready to get to work. So FileMaker always imports from a found set, so we want to make sure that we have all our records found, and then we can begin our import. So let's go File, Import Records, and we'll select our names table. And I'm going to pause this while I line everything up, and then I'll be right back. Okay, we've got everything lined up, and let's go through it. Basically, we're going to import everything we know about the contact, but nothing that goes in related tables. So we've got their name, we're going to get that. We have their company name, but we're not going to import that yet, because we're going to do that once we've created the company records. We have a phone and an email, and then we have phone 2, like an additional phone number in the data file over here. We're not going to bring that in because that goes in a related table. And then we're going to bring in the Temp ID, and this is an Add New Records import. So we do that. We always want to make sure we perform our auto enter options, and we'll see we get 100 records with no errors, which is great. Did I not bring in, it looks like I didn't get my Temp IDs in. Why is that? Let's do File, Import Records again, and just see what happened there. Oh, I didn't turn this on. So that happens. At this point, if you haven't, if you neglect something like this, if you haven't got the Temp ID in there yet, you're going to want to start over. So I'm going to delete these File, Records, delete found records. I'm going to delete these 100 records because FileMaker keeps that found set, and just start over. So File, Import Records, Names. It's going to keep our import order. I'm going to turn the Temp ID on, and now we should be good to go. Now we get our 100, and we have our little IDs in here, which is great. So now the first thing we want to do is get these IDs back over here. We want to get the contact IDs that were created back over into the data here. And we do that using that temp ID. This is one reason these temp IDs are so cool. They let you don't have to get your import right the first time. You can kind of go back and forth. And I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. So let's go get these things. So now from the names table, we're going to go File, Import Records, and we're going to import from contacts. I think this is on the desktop. SeedCode Complete. Remember, data is in the model file. And we're going to grab from the contacts table. And I'll pause this while I line these guys up. That's all lined up. It's pretty simple. We want the ID that was just created to come into contact ID, but we're going to use the temp ID as the match field. Remember, you kind of click on this and eventually you get both arrows. It becomes the match field if you're using an update matching records import. So now when we click import, you'll see now that we get our contact IDs for these 100 records, which is awesome. Now we can do all sorts of stuff with these contacts. Because like if there was a middle name field that I forgot, I could just do another import into contacts, matching on either the temp ID, but I'll probably want to match on the primary key now that I have it. In fact, when you're done with all these imports, you'll want to delete this temp ID, so when you get another list and want to go through this process again, you can kind of rely on these temp IDs. So when you're all done, you want to clear this out. But for now, let's go on. Let's do our next data set, which is companies. So I'm going to go over to the companies table. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create that temp ID. Okay, and I'll probably put a couple of temp ID, company name. Put a few of these little guys on the layout so it's easier to read. Okay, and let's import these. Now, I know that all these company names are unique in this file, but if they weren't, I might do a sub-summary export so that I only had a new table with just the unique company names and their unique temp IDs. But I know these are all unique, so that's okay. So let's go File, Import Records, and select from Downloads our names table. And this is pretty simple. I can just line this up for you. We're going to go company name. We're going to let it create the ID. We don't have any other facts about the company, but we do want that temp ID very much like we wanted it for contacts. So we want the company name and the temp ID. We're going to make new records. Again, always check this little box. So great, now we got our company records, which is perfect. So if you were to look at our contacts at this point, you'll see that they don't have companies yet. And the reason is that the relationship between the contact and the company is based on an association record, right? There's based on a record that link the two together. If you look at this portal here, these are association records. So we need to now import those contacts, those companies into the associations table. But before we do that, we need to go get the company ID just like we went and got the contact ID. So we're going to come over here and we're going to pull those company IDs back, just like we did with contacts. So importing from the model file. Right, we're going to import from companies. And we want to get not the contact ID, we want the company ID. And we're going to match it on the temp ID. Bring this up. Come on. Almost. There we go. Okay, so that's our match field. We'll do an update matching records, ID to company ID. And now we get, so this is nice. We now have a record of, from the data we imported, these are the contact IDs that were created, and these are the company IDs that were created. And now we're ready to import into that associations table. So one more time, let's go into Model and head over to the associations layout. And I'm going to put a few things on this layout so that I can understand what's happening here. I'm going to grab the ID and role and type and these two IDs. I'm going to bring them all over. And we can kind of look at the existing data to see kind of what's going on. Let's make these guys a little wider. So what we're seeing here is that, oh, okay, we have a company relationship here, we have a couple of IDs, and we have roles. So that's cool. I see what's happening here. And so I happen to know that the entity child is the contacts ID, and the entity parent is the company ID. So the company is a parent of the child. So we'll import these 100 records into associations, and look what I have right here. I have the contact ID and the company ID, exactly what we need to make these association records. And I think we have one other thing in here that's interesting, which is primary. Remember we talked about some of these relationships being primary, we're going to want to flag that too when we're done. All right, so let's import these. So import records from our downloads table. So the child is the contact, the parent is the company. We're going to let it make the ID, and that is all we need to do. Contact ID to entity child, company ID to entity parent. Oh, we do have a parent name, which we're going to bring in here. That's the company name. I think that's all we need to do. I don't think we need the child name for this. If we may kind of create a full name field and bring it into child name. I'll just bring in first name and last name for now. Okay, import. And again, always perform your auto enter options. Great. So we have all our relationships here, but we do need to tag this with one of those values. We want to make sure that all these things we imported here are company relationships. So we'll replace field contents on that. And these are all the primary companies for these contacts, and we'll replace on that. So we're almost done with managing the companies. The only thing we have left to do is that this information is also stored at the contacts level. You'll see if we come over to these contacts, they don't yet have their company names yet. And that's because there's one more thing to import into contacts. So let's do that now. So while this is kind of a tricky, is a number of imports going back and forth, having the data set up this way with separate contacts and companies and associations gives you a lot of flexibility down the road for not terrible amount of work on the import. All right, so this is actually, again, into the contacts table. And we're going to import a new fact about all these contacts, so file, import records. And you can see while we waited to do this, when I line this up, what we're now going to do is we're going to get their company name, and we now have their company ID. So company ID goes into ID company, and company name goes into company name. And now we will have finished importing into contacts. So, but this is going to be an update matching records, right? We already have these contacts. We're going to base the whole thing on ID, because we have the contacts ID as well. Boom, that's our match field. So for every contact where the IDs match, bring in the company ID and the company name. Perform your auto enter options. We got all these records, and now when we come over here, we should see that we have company names for all these people. So that is great. So at this point, we're all done with everything. We got company names, we got phone numbers, but we know that we have a few contacts with an additional phone number, and we need to take care of them next. Now before we do, there's one script we kind of want to run. It's in our documentation over here in importing contacts where it says populate related contact info tables. We're going to want to run that script because here's why. So this number, 15587, it's over here, but we also want that phone number over here. Just like we did with companies, we want to get that phone number over here so that when we have additional phone numbers for this person, we can swap between them, as I kind of showed at the beginning of the video. So in order to do that, we have a script that'll make all these little phone number records for you, and that's the one that's documented over there. It's called populate related contact info tables, and you can search for it, but just by hitting pop. So that's it right there. Let's just run that. It leaves you kind of on the last contacts record, and you can see it also brings over their emails and their phone numbers, marks them as primary. It's a nice little script. You just make sure you click save on this last one. Okay, so now we just have to import those second phone numbers, and we should be all set. So let's find the records that have additional phone numbers, just those 4. And let's go into SeedCode model and switch over to contact info. And if we add some fields here, you'll see that we have ID, ID contact, value, and type. Bring those over. And you can see what's going on here. For each of these contacts, like here's a URL, there's the value, there's a phone number, there's the value. So we're going to import the value and the contact ID, and then we'll tag it with phone. So let's say file, import records, and this is the last step of our import. Again, we've done a found set where we only have the records with additional phone numbers. So phone 2 is going to go into value. Turn all these off. And the contact ID becomes ID contact. And we're making new records. So we're going to let it create an ID. So let's do that. Perform auto enter options. We're good. And now we want to make sure these are all tagged as phone. Do a little replace. And they're not primary because we already imported all the primary records. So now if we take a look at merit here, and whoop, cancel, switch back. Take a look at merit and go to edit. We'll see that we have this additional phone number over here and their primary phone number over here. And we are good to go. And there are our two phone numbers. So that is importing into SeedCode Complete. I hope it helps. And feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions. Thanks.